A lot of investors don't fail at Airbnb because they bought the wrong property. They fail because they stayed in the wrong strategy too long. They kept tweaking pricing, updating furniture, changing photos, trying to fix something that the market has already decided isn't working. And the longer they wait to pivot, the more money they burn. If you're feeling that right now, or even starting to question your numbers, you're not alone. Because the Phoenix market has changed, and what worked for short-term rentals 2 or 3 years ago, it's not working the same today. At the same time, midterm rentals are getting a lot more attention. And that's where investors get stuck, because now you're trying to figure out, do I stick with Airbnb and try to optimize it? Or do I pivot to midterm rentals and go for stability? So what I want to do in this video is give you a clear framework to make that decision. Not based on hype, not based on what someone on Twitter said, but based on your actual property, your numbers, and what the market is telling you. First, we need to reset how you're thinking about this. You are not an Airbnb investor. You are not a midterm rental investor. You are an investor trying to generate cash flow, and the strategy should change if the performance doesn't make sense. The biggest mistake I see is people getting emotionally attached to Airbnb. They want it to work. They've invested in furniture, branding, setup. So instead of stepping back and evaluating it objectively, they double down. That's how people lose money. So let's talk about the first real signal that it might be time to pivot, and that's inconsistent occupancy. I'm not talking about seasonality. Phoenix has busy seasons and slow seasons. That is completely normal. What I'm talking about is when your booking calendar looks unpredictable. You'll have a solid stretch, then random gaps, then a couple weekend bookings, then nothing midweek. That inconsistency is a problem because it makes your income unreliable, and usually it's a sign that your property is not strongly positioned for short-term demand. Either the location isn't ideal, or there's too much competition around you, or your property just isn't standing out enough to command consistent bookings. And here's the key. If you have to constantly fight to stay booked, that's not a strong short-term rental asset. That's a property that might be better suited for a different strategy. The second signal is pricing pressure. This one is happening a lot right now. If you feel like every time you open your pricing tool, you're lowering your rates just to stay competitive, that's not a great position to be in, because now your margins are shrinking and you're still dealing with all the operational intensity of short-term rentals. So you end up in this situation where you're working harder for less money. That's usually when I start having the midterm rental conversation with clients, because midterm rental demand is different. You're not competing for weekend travelers anymore. You are targeting travel nurses, corporate relocations, insurance displacements, people between homes. These tenants are less price sensitive on a nightly basis and more focused on convenience and availability. The third signal, and honestly the one that's the biggest, is burnout. This is a part people don't talk about enough. Short-term rentals are operationally heavy. Even if you have a cleaner, even if you have systems, there's still constant coordination. Guest messages, turnovers, supplies, maintenance. And at some point, a lot of investors realize this isn't passive at all. And if the cash flow isn't strong enough to justify that effort, it starts to break down. Midterm rentals reduce that significantly. You might have one guest for 30, 60, or even 90 days. That changes everything operationally. Now, this is where most people make a mistake. Just because you're experiencing those problems does not automatically mean you should pivot. You still have to look at the numbers, because I've seen people switch to midterm too early and leave money on the table. So here's how to actually make the decision. Step 1, you need to calculate your real Airbnb performance, not your best month, not your projection, your actual trailing performance. Look at the last 6 to 12 months and ask, what is this property really averaging per month? Then subtract cleaning, utilities, supplies, management if you have it, maintenance. What are you actually netting? That number matters more than anything. Step 2, you compare that to a realistic midterm scenario. And I want to emphasize realistic, not best case. In Phoenix, most midterm rentals are going to produce lower top line revenues than a great Airbnb month, but much more consistency and lower expenses. So the question becomes, would you rather have a volatile $5,000 month followed by a $2,500 month, or a consistent $3,500 every month? A lot of investors are starting to choose consistency. Step 3, evaluate the property itself. And this is huge because not every property should be an Airbnb. If you're not close to Old Town Scottsdale, near major hospitals, near business hubs, in a highly desirable short-term area, your property may never fully optimize as a short-term rental. But that same property could be perfect for a midterm tenant. This is especially true in areas like Chandler, Mesa, Gilbert. Those are strong midterm markets, but they're not always strong short-term markets. Now, let's go one level deeper because there's also a timing component to this. A lot of investors wait too long to pivot. They keep thinking, let me just try one more month. Let me adjust pricing again. Let me change the listing. Meanwhile, they're stacking losses or underperformance. A smarter approach is to test earlier. You can shift to midterm for 60 to 90 days, see how it performs, and then decide. This doesn't have to be permanent. Let me give you a clearer example. Let's say you own a 4-bedroom home in Gilbert. On paper, as an Airbnb, it looked like a great deal. But in reality, you're averaging $4,000 a month with high variability and lots of operational involvement. Now you switch to midterm. You lock in a tenant at $3,600 for 3 months. No cleanings during that time, minimal communication. Now your income is more predictable. Your workload drops. Your stress drops. That's a win for a lot of investors. And this is really what it comes down to. You're not choosing between Airbnb and midterm rentals. You're choosing between volatility versus stability, higher upside versus consistency, active versus semi-passive. The right answer depends on your goals. And one last thing I'll say, this strategy is only part of the equation. Execution matters just as much. I've seen great properties underperform as both short-term and midterm rentals because they weren't set up or managed correctly. So if you're going to pivot, you need to do it the right way. Positioning, pricing, tenant targeting, all of that matters. And if you're trying to figure out whether you should stick with Airbnb, pivot to midterm, or even buy a different type of property entirely, that's exactly the kind of thing I help investors work through. But I don't just jump on random phone calls. I like to understand your situation first, your goals, your budget, what you already own, so I can give you real direction. So I put together a quick intake form. Takes about 2 minutes to fill out. Once you submit that, if it looks like a good fit, I'll reach out and we'll map out a strategy, whether that's optimizing your current property, pivoting, or helping you acquire something that actually performs better in this market.